The Making of a Luna. Previous episodes are available on the playlist. You can also visit our website for your favorite stories. A link is provided in the video description. Episode 2. The subject reported experiencing a sense of sadness in the absence of her pack. However, she reported a greater sense of belonging in the unfamiliar environment than in her pack territory, which she found to be a novel and unexpected sentiment. The 3 individuals she encountered thus far appeared to exhibit a greater degree of warmth in their interactions compared to the members of her pack, including her family and her brother. The accommodations provided for her were more comfortable than those she was accustomed to at home. A notable benefit of being away from her pack was that, since her arrival at the airport or perhaps even earlier, she did not experience the pain that had plagued her in recent days. The pain that had previously afflicted her on a daily basis had abated by the time she departed from the pack border, and she had been absent for a period exceeding 24 hours. Pursuant to the established precedent, the initiation of the process should have occurred by this point. The alarm on her telephone sounded half an hour prior to dinner, precisely as she concluded her organization of personal belongings in the wardrobe and bathroom. Experiencing a state of considerable hunger, she proceeded to take a brief shower, change into fresh attire, and hastily exit her room. She navigated the hallways with ease, following the directions provided on the maps to locate the various rooms. After a brief search, she arrived at the common room. With a deliberate inhalation, she positioned her hand on the doorknob and exhaled, taking a moment to collect herself before attempting to open the door. During her journey to the location, she did not observe any individuals. However, it is reasonable to assume that the premises contain numerous other individuals who have arrived with the intention of partaking in the culinary offerings. She exhibited sufficient boldness to attend the selection, yet her interpersonal skills were deficient, hindering her ability to engage in meaningful interactions, even in the context of casual discourse. She was acutely aware of the necessity to avoid drawing attention to herself, a concern that was exacerbated by the likelihood of being the sole female candidate in the group. As she firmly grasped the doorknob, applying a clockwise rotation, she regained her composure. Subsequently, the door was expeditiously opened from the interior. Her inattentiveness, compounded by her nervousness, momentarily impaired her ability to focus, thus preventing her from reacting promptly and stepping aside in time. Consequently, the impact of the door caused a slight jolt to her head. The individual on the opposite side of the interaction experienced a state of paralysis, as he comprehended the consequences of his actions. Consequently, he proceeded to open the door with a deliberate and measured pace, his gaze fixed intently on the individual he had struck, in an effort to locate him. Upon observing the lowered head, which was being gently massaged by a small hand, he immediately offered a sincere apology. "I apologize, I should have opened it more slowly. I did not see you." He had intended to articulate further sentiments when the diminutive cranium elevated, thereby maintaining the silence surrounding his previously conceived sentiments of remorse. Initially, he believed the individual before him to be another man, a candidate akin to himself, as the person's ponytail obscured the length of the hair. Furthermore, the building was exclusively occupied by males, with the exception of 2 secretaries who were readily identifiable by their professional attire. However, upon observing her delicate countenance, he experienced a profound sense of astonishment. He had never before encountered a girl of such exquisite beauty. The subject's stature was notably tall, nearly matching the subject's height. However, her facial features were characterized by a diminutive profile, accentuated by her chocolate-toned eyes and impeccably flawless skin. Despite the absence of any cosmetic adornments, her countenance radiated a natural luminosity. Despite the plainness of her attire, which consisted of a t-shirt and denim jeans, her aesthetic appeal remained unblemished. It is satisfactory. I also failed to pay attention. In response, she articulated her sentiments with earnestness, her intention being to proceed past him in order to gain entry. Despite the apparent clarity of her intentions to enter, the man remained immobilized, leaving her with no recourse but to reiterate her message. I apologize for the interruption, but I would like to inquire about the possibility of entering. The inquiry was posed in a hushed tone, as if spoken in a confidential whisper. After a period of reflection, he recognized the impoliteness of his earlier behavior and, upon hearing her voice, which was as resplendent as her physical appearance, he hastily offered a response. "Oh, I apologize. It must be acknowledged that the aforementioned statements may be perceived as discourteous." "Certainly." He promptly vacated the premises, allowing her to enter without hesitation. However, it appeared that he had initially intended to exit, and he swiftly followed her inside. "My name is Jackson. Might I inquire as to your identity?" he inquired, his countenance a picture of amiability, ensconced at one of the tables located in close proximity to the doorway. Elara Quinn." In response, she employed a strategy of self-censorship, effectively stifling any immediate verbal expression. Thereafter, she opted for a state of taciturn silence. The subject experienced a sense of discomfort due to the male subject's apparent reluctance to vacate the table she had selected, despite her apparent lack of enthusiasm. However, she found herself unable to request his departure directly. "Elara, I would like to inquire whether you are one of the secretaries responsible for guiding the candidates on their tour. I have been present in this area for several days and have not observed your presence in the vicinity." Given the considerable size of the academy, it was not unexpected that he had not yet had the opportunity to make her acquaintance, despite his having been present for a week. However, he was at a loss as to how to initiate a conversation with her. "I arrived today for the selection process. I am not one of the secretaries." Her response was characterized by an absence of facial expression change, a consistent pattern in her demeanor. Her countenance remained impassive, defying facile interpretation. Despite the fact that she experienced a certain degree of perplexity regarding the familiarity he exhibited, she refrained from expressing it overtly. He had initiated a direct and informal conversation with her, disregarding the established protocol of requesting permission beforehand. Regarding the selection process, the query pertains to the moonlight selection. "Is one of your relatives taking the exam?" Jackson inquired with a sense of curiosity, hoping that the response would not be related to a romantic partner. "No, not a member of my family. I am the one undertaking the examination." She stated that further elucidation was unnecessary. Her aspiration to become a moonlight necessitated the courage to articulate her aspirations without the concern of facing derision from others. In addition, the remaining candidates would ascertain the truth on the following Monday. He experienced a sudden cessation of movement, similar to the way he had previously stood still in place upon seeing her face. This phenomenon was also observed among the majority of the male individuals dispersed throughout the common room, seated at various tables. Since her initial entrance, she has been the focal point of all present. Given their superior ranking in the werewolf category, their acuity of hearing surpasses that of standard-ranking werewolves, enabling them to discern every word she uttered. "Oh! It is a pleasure to make your acquaintance, esteemed colleague." In contrast to her initial assumptions, the man did not display any mocking expression on his face. Indeed, the only discernible change in his countenance was the initial expression of bewilderment, which swiftly transitioned into a radiant smile, as he extended his hand toward her. In actuality, Jackson harbored a multitude of inquiries, which were also on the minds of the majority of the men in attendance. However, he was reluctant to appear discourteous by inquiring about the purpose of the female's presence among the selectors. In any event, should he become her friend, it is possible that he will be able to ascertain more information over time. It is important to note that addressing an excessive number of inquiries at this stage could potentially result in the subject's subsequent reluctance to engage with the individual in question. While he was uncertain about her ability to pass all the necessary exams, she did not appear to be someone who would undertake the moonlight examination on a whim. The man's physical appearance was notable for its attractiveness, and his past romantic engagements included numerous partners of similar appearance. His choice of attire and general presentation conveyed an impression of affluence. However, the woman displayed a marked reluctance to engage in conversation or to make eye contact. Her presence at the academy was predicated on the future selection. It was hypothesized that in the event of his departure, she would not demonstrate any inclination to acknowledge his absence, nor would she endeavor to impede his exit. This marked the first instance in which a female individual did not find him to be charming. It was a cordial salutation, expressing a pleasant encounter. Elara's response was swift, and she maintained minimal contact with his hand, with her palm barely making contact with his. Her countenance remained unaltered in response to his welcoming words, yet internally she experienced a profound sense of relief. It appeared that he was a person with whom she could easily establish a rapport, despite her initial impression of his superficiality, which she assumed dominated his character. The subject expressed satisfaction that the woman did not dismiss him entirely, and subsequently requested permission to accompany her for dinner. Following the receipt of this permission, the two individuals shared a meal together. The woman's responses were limited to the questions posed by the male, with no independent inquiries from her. However, her level of engagement and enthusiasm increased when the subject turned to the specifics of the exams. Despite these observations, the male subject expressed satisfaction with the interaction. It became evident that she harbored a genuine interest in undertaking the examination, as evidenced by the evident enthusiasm she exhibited during discussions about the subject. Experiencing a sense of relief upon identifying a shared topic of conversation, he endeavored to sustain the dialogue by employing this subject matter throughout the dinner engagement. For the subsequent days, she remained in her room, as she perceived the other candidates to be observing her with great interest whenever she exited the room. She could not discern the rationale behind this behavior. It is imperative to ascertain whether her appearance was perceived as unconventional or if her presence as a female candidate was a source of discomfort for the male candidates. On occasion, she would even examine her phone's screen, utilizing it as a mirror, under the impression that a foreign object might be present on her face. However, upon repeated inspection, she failed to discern any anomaly. The subject reported perceiving an unidentified presence in the form of a visual sensation, characterized by the sensation of being observed. This presence was interpreted as having a communicative intent, though the subject did not perceive any verbal or other form of communication. Due to the discomfort she experienced under their scrutiny, she predominantly remained indoors, venturing out solely for the purpose of dining. She partook of meals in the company of Jackson, who, fortuitously or otherwise, took a seat at her table on each occasion. The subject had limited experience with the opposite sex, but the individual in question did not engage in excessive personal space invasion. The majority of his discourse with the subject revolved around the impending examinations, a subject that sparked her intellectual curiosity. The information he provided regarding the selection was more extensive than the information she provided. As a result, their discussions were quite informative. The first test was scheduled for the following Monday. The test was to be administered in alphabetical order, and as her name was Quinn, she was among the first to undergo it. As previously elucidated by the secretary, the initial test was designated as the seer test, for which she continued to harbor reservations regarding its outcome. However, her trepidation was somewhat mitigated by the fact that the instructor overseeing the examination would be the sole individual privy to her ability. The subject was uncertain about the extent of her abilities, but she was determined to conceal her secret from others and the fact that she had shifted at a young age. It is noteworthy that she had never undergone such an evaluation by the seer, as such procedures were generally not performed, unless the individual expressly requested it. It is evident that the subject was aware of her sister's visit to the physician on the second day following her transformation. This visit was motivated by her sister's desire to ascertain her newly acquired abilities. During this visit, the sister informed her mother of her status as a fifth-rank werewolf. This outcome was met with universal approval by the subject's family, as it served to substantiate the hypothesis that the subject was indeed Luna material. On the first day of testing, approximately 150 of the 1,000 plus werewolves were scheduled to participate. Jackson was also in proximity to her, as his last name was Black. Prior to the arrival of the supervising instructor in the amphitheater, the examinees were engaged in a state of discourse and hushed conversation. However, upon his entrance and commencement of an explanation regarding the examination, the examinees fell silent. Greetings. My name is Elias Vainakes, and I have been designated as the instructor for the general education component for those who successfully complete the aforementioned acceptance examination. The purpose of this study is to examine the wolf and its power using the seer. For those unacquainted with the seer's functions, I offer the following clarifications. Those who are aware of the implications of this phenomenon are respectfully requested to maintain their silence, as they are bound by an obligation to pay heed, irrespective of their personal sentiments on the matter. He informed them with a smile. The presence of the instructor, who appeared to be of a similar age to the candidates, contributed to an atmosphere of relaxation and levity. His humorous demeanor served to further alleviate the tension among the candidates, fostering an enjoyable and comfortable environment. This intervention served to mitigate the prevailing tension in the expansive environment. The seer has been utilized since antiquity to exhibit information to those who make contact with it and release a portion of their wolf's aura. The following 3 pieces of information will be displayed. The initial factor to be considered is rank. The rank of wolf ranges from rank 1 to rank 10. The highest rank that a wolf can attain is designated as 10, whereas the lowest rank is designated as 1. Additionally, werewolves with wolves exist, though these cannot be ranked due to the absence of data. These individuals, designated as omegas, lack the requisite strength to power up the seer and ascertain their rank. It is unfortunate that the subject's aura is insufficiently robust to facilitate the initiation of the process. The following rankings have been established. Wolves classified as rank 10 are considered to be either normal pack wolves or worker wolves. The 8th and 9th ranks are designated as tracker and warrior wolves, respectively. The 7th rank is designated as delta wolves. The 6th rank is designated as gamma wolves. The 5th rank is designated as beta wolves. It is noteworthy that lunas of a pack also hold this rank. Despite the fact that the individuals present are exclusively male, the subsequent evaluation is not contingent upon this factor. He then trailed off, emitting a chuckle, but his smile abruptly froze when his eyes met Elara's. It was at this juncture that Elias recollected the existence of a female candidate in the current year's competition. Recognizing his misstep, he coughed to mitigate the discomfort of his miscalculation and resumed his explanation. Typically, candidates would find this joke amusing, but this year, no one responded in a humorous manner. The question must be raised, who would do such a thing? It appeared that she had assimilated seamlessly into their group. Since her arrival at the dormitory, the majority of the male students have intermittently cast their gaze upon the only female candidate. The subject was characterized by physical attractiveness, a reserved demeanor, and a perceived fragility that would cause her to appear as if she might succumb to injury if physically embraced. However, her aura was perceived as having a notable degree of potency. Curiously, she also refrained from submitting when she passed by them, as weaker werewolves did when higher-ranked ones would walk near them. Furthermore, given that the majority of the subjects exhibited a power level that fell within the alpha and beta categories, they had become accustomed to being the objects of adoration from women. However, she represented an exception to this norm. Apart from the designated meal times, her presence was seldom observed, a circumstance that was perceived as regrettable by those in attendance. It must be noted that the majority of individuals sought to pursue a romantic relationship with her. Therefore, it is counterintuitive to assume that they would engage in humorous behavior, as this would likely result in the deterioration of their prospects for a successful courtship. Wolf Rank 4 is the archetypal alpha. Wolf Rank 3 members are considered stronger alphas. This rank is commensurate with the expected level of expertise of the observers. According to the established hierarchy, Rank 2 wolves are designated as members of the council. The one-man rank, alternatively referred to as one man, is a designation held by a single alpha, who collectively serves as the leader of all the packs. Individuals who are not yet aware of their rank need not be discouraged. It is imperative to dispel the notion that this is a sign of weakness, regardless of the circumstances. It is important to note that each rank is subdivided into 10 sub-ranks. In order to comprehend this concept with greater clarity, it is imperative to recognize that if an individual holds the 5th rank, they possess tenfold the strength of an individual who holds the 6th rank. Individuals who hold the 5th rank sub-rank 5 possess a strength that is 5 times greater than that of individuals who hold the 6th rank sub-rank 0. It should be noted that all of the teachers are considered to be as powerful as watchers. This indicates that each of us possesses the 3rd rank, complemented by extensive experience in combat. It is imperative to bear this in mind when engaging in discourse with one of us. Elias articulated his perspective with remarkable eloquence, endeavoring to maintain the authority befitting a pedagogue. It is evident that he sought to regain the prestige he had previously lost. The crowd was perplexed. They were aware of the concept of ranks, but lacked familiarity with the intricacies of sub-ranks. Teacher, we have never been exposed to the concept of sub-ranks. It is reasonable to hypothesize that one of the candidates was unable to restrain his curiosity regarding the findings. It is conceivable that this is a possibility. The seer employed by the pack doctor is incapable of identifying sub-ranks, and the pack doctor is similarly unable to recognize them. I hypothesize that I should be the sole individual with this ability. Elias articulated his statements with a neutral tone, yet a discernible sense of pride remained underlying his words. Is it permissible to inquire further? The same individual was queried, and authorization was obtained, thus enabling the subsequent course of action. The inquiry posed pertains to the rationale behind the designation of the initial rank as one-man rank. The young man was intrigued and confused by the fact that each rank contained more werewolves than one. The inquiry posed pertains to the existence of additional monarchs within the specified demographic. Elias's response was in the form of another question, posed with a smile as he surveyed the room from left to right. Subsequently, following a period of silence, the speaker elaborated on the subject. It is a matter of historical record that only one person holds this rank each generation, and that this is the case because that is our king, thus explaining the appellation one-man rank. It is notable that the remaining ranks are held by a greater number of individuals. The rank in question is devoid of sub-ranks, as the disparity in power between ranks 1 and 2 is considered negligible. This calculation indicates that a group of 100 individuals, assuming they could successfully execute a coordinated assault, would be capable of overthrowing the current ruling monarch. The collective was momentarily still, a state of stunned silence that was then followed by the emergence of small murmurs in various locations. The subjects were aware of their king's considerable power, yet they were not cognizant of the extent to which he was truly formidable. Therefore, the revelation engendered profound admiration in their hearts. It is imperative that all parties involved maintain composure and allow the proceedings to continue. The second phenomenon that the seer will demonstrate is the manifestation of the wolf, which will occur without the necessity of physical transformation. The program has the capacity to compare the subject wolf with other wolves, and it can even ascertain whether the subject wolf possesses talents that differ from the standard set of abilities characteristic of wolves in general. The objective is to demonstrate the rapid rate of regeneration exhibited by the wolf, in addition to its formidable strength and substantial size. In regard to the subject's unique aptitudes, the assessment will ascertain the subject's affinities with the elements of earth, wind, water, and fire. The seer's third ability is the display of health problems. This is the set of skills that medical professionals primarily utilize in the provision of healthcare and diagnostic services. However, as I am not responsible for your health, I will only be addressing the first 2 points I previously outlined. In accordance with the established protocol, all individuals regardless of gender are requested to proceed to the conference room in alphabetical order, as their names have been sequentially selected for further evaluation. It is imperative to note 2 additional points. Firstly, there is no cause for concern, as the room is under a spell, thereby ensuring the confidentiality of any information. Secondly, it is presumed that the relevant individual has provided a thorough explanation regarding the matter at hand upon the initial arrival. It is imperative to note that the individual in question is currently under an inextricable curse, which precludes the divulging of any information obtained through analysis. The only information that will be disclosed to the general public is the decision regarding the applicant's acceptance or rejection. In order to be considered for acceptance, it is necessary to have a minimum rank of 4 or 5. Ideally, the objective is to attain rank 3, however, the opportunity to progress to subsequent stages of the assessment will be granted to those who have attained the specified ranks. The testing procedure was conducted for a duration of approximately 1 hour, until Elara's turn to participate arrived. Jackson had previously undergone testing, and he was amenable to sharing his rank with her, given that he was a 3rd-rank werewolf. It is plausible that he may have deliberately sought to exhibit his prowess in her presence. Upon hearing her name, Elara proceeded to the conference room, where the teacher was administering an examination. She positioned herself in front of the door, her hand on the knob, her body trembling as she gradually turned it to open the door. The room was quite spacious and well illuminated, despite the presence of substantial dark-colored draperies obscuring the windows, ostensibly to ensure greater privacy. She approached the teacher with trepidation and took a seat in front of the orb, which had been placed there. Presently, the seer manifested as a dark, nearly black hue. "Miss Elara Quinn, kindly place your hand on the orb and release your aura in the manner you typically do when visiting your PAX doctor." Elias articulated his perspective in a diplomatic manner. I apologize, Professor, but I have never undergone such an evaluation. Could you please elaborate on this point?" she inquired, her voice barely audible. "Very well. It is important to consider the wolf aspect of the psyche, though not in the manner of a conscious effort to access it. Rather, it is akin to allowing the wolf to occupy the forefront of one's consciousness, thereby allowing the human consciousness to recede into the background, to the realm where the wolf typically resides. Therefore, it is not necessary for the test participants to switch places with one another. In order to facilitate this process, one must attempt to envision the mind as an expansive space, with the wolf occupying one half of this imaginary environment and the individual themselves occupying the other half. It is imperative that both parties advance toward one another and arrive at the focal point of the room, thereby achieving a central position. This action signifies a reciprocal approach, representing a compromise that is neither fully one way nor fully the other, but rather a balanced and equitable middle ground. Have you grasped the concept, or should I elaborate further?" Elias elaborated further, maintaining the same previous courtesy. It was his professional responsibility to assist the students with the examination. Furthermore, he felt compelled to act in a more gentlemanly manner towards the girl. This was presumably done to mitigate the impact of a previous misstep. "I comprehend the situation, and I appreciate the information you have provided. I will endeavor to do so. However, I would like to inquire about 2 additional points. I apologize for the inconvenience of this delay. Elara articulated her sentiments with a sense of contrition. Subsequent to her, a greater number of students elected to undergo testing, thus prompting her to exercise discretion in order not to impose upon the teacher's time any longer than necessary due to the inquiries she had posed. Affirmative. Please inquire further. He smiled gently, conveying a reassuring sentiment. Firstly, it is imperative to acknowledge the necessity of informing the Council and His Highness about the rank of the wolves that are to be evaluated. Does this imply an obligation to articulate one's thoughts in all circumstances, or is it contingent upon external prompting? Typically, this occurs only in response to explicit inquiries. The Council lacks the time to verify all the information I have observed. The list containing the names of the accepted werewolves is the only one available to them, and His Highness has even less time to verify such information. And the second question. Despite an initial lack of comprehension regarding the substance of her inquiry, he maintained a serious demeanor in his response. The second issue pertains to the question of how to reach a consensus among 3 parties when there is a clear absence of a shared focal point. She inquired in a deliberate manner, almost in a whisper. Elias's countenance conveyed a state of perplexity, his eyebrows furrowed in a display of bewilderment. This state of affairs engendered a certain degree of apprehension in Elara. Given that she had observed him in the morning, during which he exhibited a jovial demeanor and engaged in humorous banter, it was the first occasion on which she had observed his serious side. What is the intended meaning of the term 3? The population under consideration consists of 2 individuals, 1 wolf and 1 person. 1 + 1 = 2. Elias expressed bewilderment at the impetus behind her inquiry. The crux of the issue pertains to the ability to find a middle ground when confronted with divergent perspectives, akin to the metaphor of navigating between 2 conflicting forces, such as the dualities of human and wolf. 1 + 2 = 3. Elara elaborated, exacerbating Elias's already profound state of perplexity. 2 wolves? The concept of a duality between 2 wolves is incompatible with the notion of a single entity comprising both wolves. He paused for a moment, attempting to discern whether she was being facetious, but Elara's countenance remained inscrutable, devoid of any discernible emotion. Very well. In order to facilitate this process, it is recommended that one of the wolves advance and approach the seer, while ensuring that the seer's hand is placed upon the wolf. We will conduct additional testing with the other wolf. He provided her with straightforward instructions. The presence of 1 wolf or 2 wolves was of no consequence, regardless of the number. He would ascertain the truth of the matter in a moment. In the event that her statements were accurate, he would be able to obtain clarifications at a later time. The subject complied with the instructions provided, facilitating an encounter between Naira and herself at a mutually agreeable location. An ebony aura enveloped her hand where the orb had been touched, and as he observed the luminous crystal, he perceived her rank. The rank in question was the 4th. This rank is particularly noteworthy, given that the majority of girls typically attain a rank of only up to the 5th level. The Luna-ranked werewolves were 5th rank, or, for weaker packs, they were even 6th rank. However, her rank, even if it surpassed that of a Luna, was insufficient for the moonlight position. The 4th rank werewolves were permitted to remain in the testing phase, as the candidates exhibited the potential to make additional improvements. However, elevating one's rank was a highly challenging, if not altogether unfeasible, endeavor. In addition, the number of candidates exceeded the typical figure. In the event that at least 10 candidates are found to have obtained the third rank, those who have obtained the fourth rank and higher will be eliminated by default. Elias also examined her wolf's appearance, as in the orb a grey wolf with tinges of black appeared. The subject's size was equivalent to that of a typical alpha specimen. However, the subject's distinctive luminous properties were even more surprising. The phenomenon of an ethereal luminescence manifesting around wolves was observed to be exclusive to those wolves who exhibited a proclivity for elemental abilities. The red light indicated fire, the grey light indicated wind, the blue light indicated water, and the brown light indicated earth. The subject was enveloped by a red and blue light, as well as elements of fire and water. These two powers are diametrically opposed. In most cases, wolves with complementary talents were able to exploit each other's weaknesses, leading to a scenario where one wolf's strength could be counterbalanced by the other's weakness. However, it is pertinent to inquire about the potential vulnerabilities that a wolf endowed with both elements might possess. Very well, I have observed it. The subject's wolf is of the fourth rank, possessing aptitude for both fire and water. At this juncture, the subject is instructed to remove their hand from the aforementioned position and to place it back in place while simultaneously focusing their thoughts on the other wolf. Elias stated, as he inscribed his observations on a sheet of paper, though not in her official document. He was under the impression that there was no other wolf. It is possible that she perceived the presence of two wolves, attributable to the two distinct elements. However, the king placed a strong emphasis on respect, and this policy entailed the provision of testing to all individuals, regardless of their apparent strength. This approach was adopted to ensure the equitable treatment of all and to provide the benefit of the doubt to those who might appear to be weaker. Subsequent to receiving the aforementioned instructions, she engaged in the requested activity, contemplating Sable in her thoughts. On this occasion, a radiant white light enveloped her hand. Elias's perplexity was evident as he observed the change in color, a phenomenon that was not possible for a werewolf. He directed his attention more intently toward the orb. Subsequently, as the seer presented the various pieces of information, he swiftly ascertained her rank, having already been taken aback by the altered appearance of the wolf reflected. He examined the matter repeatedly, yet remained perplexed. A pertinent question to address is whether he should be concerned that her wolf was another, as the rank displayed indeed changed, or whether he should be concerned about the fact that the first rank, the rank of the king, could no longer be named one-man rank. She considered the situation to be peculiar. The instructor, who had initially exhibited a cheerful disposition and was in a positive frame of mind while elucidating the examination, subsequently adopted a displeased expression upon perceiving the information presented. Despite elapsing several moments, he refrained from verbalization, his countenance increasingly expressing astonishment with each passing second. Her heart began to race, causing a palpable sensation in her chest. The inquiry is made as to whether a problem with her was in fact present. It is imperative to ascertain whether her decision to come here was a miscalculation. For an extended period, she refrained from undergoing testing due to her apprehensions regarding the potential abnormalities associated with her circumstances. Ultimately, she proceeded independently, venturing into a highly perilous situation. Nevertheless, she was unable to restrain her aspirations. She harbored a profound desire to become a moonlight, making it her most fervent aspiration. Her desire for this outcome was so profound that she did not hesitate to act on her mother's counsel, even in the presence of others who might have questioned her decision to be the sole female participant. It must be noted that there were two wolf consciousnesses present within the subject's mind, which had already rendered the teacher mute. Upon conducting a thorough evaluation of Sable, the educator's brow furrowed further. Had she been aware that the testing procedure was conducted individually, with each wolf being tested, and that the results would be displayed exclusively for the designated wolf, she would have concealed Sable's existence, as she had always recognized that Sable appeared to possess greater strength than Nyra. For an extended period, she had maintained her concealment, even refraining from assuming her true form due to her awareness that, upon transformation, Sable's aura would be marginally contained. The evidentiary basis for this assertion is as follows. Upon her initial transformation, she adopted Sable's wolf form. During the second occurrence, she experienced a pronounced auditory and physical disturbance, characterized by the cracking and repositioning of her bones, which resulted in a substantial commotion. During her initial transformation, when she adopted Nyra's physical form, no specific occurrence transpired. She still recollected the resonant vibrations of the trackers emanating from the forest, their sonic emissions characterized by a continuous low-frequency hum, accompanied by intermittent, resonant, low-pitched vocalizations. These auditory phenomena occurred as the trackers conducted their search for an intruder who had attempted to challenge their alpha status. It was not her intention to release the threatening aura or to defy the leadership. The issue at hand was that, regrettably, this was perceived as a challenge for the leader's position during her assigned work period. Fortunately, her superior speed enabled her to evade detection, allowing her to discreetly conceal herself in a secluded location and revert to her human form. Consequently, the three arrived at the consensus that they would only transform into Nyra's form, given that, despite Nyra's comparable strength to that of a conventional alpha, the combined potency of Nyra and Sable rendered it more feasible to subdue her aura. In the forest, the presence of the wolf was imperceptible to all observers, as the animal adapted to its environment with remarkable stealth. Sable refrained from lodging any objections on this basis. She did not voice any discontent regarding the necessity of being subdued. She reassured Elara that assuming Nyra's form to traverse the woods would offer solace to her as well. Elara arrived at the testing site with the hypothesis that her strength was equivalent to that of a moonlight. Therefore, it was not unexpected that she would also eventually shift into Sable's form. In the context of an academy populated by a substantial number of alpha-ranked werewolves, where higher-ranked werewolves were regarded as the prevailing norm, Sable's form would not deviate from the established paradigm. Consequently, her transformation would not be perceived as a threat to their authority and status. In addition to her aspiration to be a moonlight, her second wish was to allow Sable to function without restraint, ensuring that her power did not pose a threat to others. However, she intuitively sensed that the realization of this wish remained unattainable. Following a protracted period of silence on the part of the instructor, which felt like an eternity, the teacher began to mutter to himself, "This cannot be. The individual in question has achieved the rank of one man. It is not possible for that to be the case." The subject's rapid transition from a state of silence to one of pallor and then to one of amazement was, to put it mildly, an anomalous occurrence. She wished to inquire about the nature of the issue, yet she hesitated, apprehensive about his potential response. She maintained her silence, awaiting an opportunity to initiate a conversation. With a certain degree of discomfort, she withdrew her hand from the seer's grasp, thereby suppressing Sable's distinctive aura. She then awaited the imminent revelation of the results. The actions that had been taken could not be reversed. The two individuals remained in this state for several additional minutes, neither party willing to gaze upon the other, until Elias succeeded in regaining his composure and, with a raspy voice, finally spoke. "I regret to inform you that your rank is impossible. While it is not believed that the seer's predictions are erroneous, it is acknowledged that they have never been. It is also important to note that His Highness has utilized the device to verify the efficacy of his power on a regular basis. Concurrently, he has employed the device to assess the maintenance of the seer's efficiency, thereby ensuring the veracity of its readings. The practice has been utilized for centuries by numerous lycanthropes, making it a time-honored tradition with a proven track record. It is not possible for it to be incorrect, it is simply not possible for it to be incorrect." He spoke in a discursive manner, the eloquence he had exhibited in the amphitheater now conspicuously absent. "What precisely is the problem?" Elara inquired, endeavoring to preserve her composure. His repeated use of the phrase "it can't be wrong" caused her to experience a certain degree of concern. In an effort to regain his composure, he exhaled, and subsequently articulated himself in a more coherent manner. He maintained his positions as both a teacher and a high-ranking official. If he would lose his composure so easily, what would others think of him? The seer has evaluated the wolf's capabilities. It is noteworthy that this is the same rank as that of the current king. In response, the author adopted an inquisitive tone. It is imperative to ascertain whether she was already aware of her strength. Could this be the rationale behind her previous reluctance to undergo testing? Her eyes widened at the revelation, which was beyond her expectations. Sable's strength was remarkable, prompting the following inquiry: what factors contributed to her exceptional physical capabilities? Her genuine expression indicated that she was unaware of the information as well. Nevertheless, you previously asserted that only His Highness possesses rank 1. By what logic would my rank also be the same? After a brief interval of silence, she articulated the following: I'm experiencing difficulty articulating my thoughts due to stuttering. For this reason, the assertion that the endeavor is impossible was made. It is imperative that I inform His Highness and the Council of this occurrence without delay. It is imperative that the rationale behind the elevated rank be ascertained. It would be advisable to contact them immediately. Elias, visibly agitated, sought the phone with his eyes. Teacher, earlier you assured me that you would notify them exclusively in the event of an acceptance or rejection. It is imperative that the aforementioned information not be disclosed to the relevant parties. The aspiration to become a moonlight is the sole ambition that is pursued. I am not inclined to volunteer as a test subject. I do not wish to undergo any additional diagnostic procedures. The subject has indicated that his life has been characterized by a perpetual state of self-sacrifice for the benefit of others. He has expressed a desire to experience a sense of autonomy and the ability to engage in activities that align with his personal inclinations. Elara's voice exhibited a noticeable tremor as she articulated her thoughts. She had never spoken so voluminously before, but now she was endeavoring to the best of her abilities to get her opinion heard. "I apologize, I did make that statement. However, given the specific context of your situation, it is necessary for me to do so. I am compelled to inform them of this situation." Elias expressed remorse, as his gaze finally landed on the phone, which he had previously lifted from his desk. "I do not permit it. It is recommended that the reader comply with Elara's instructions. It is imperative that you put the phone down immediately." The subject was engaged in the act of dialing a telephone when the auditory sensation of a wolf occupying a higher rank within the hierarchical structure of the pack resonated within the confines of the room. This abrupt halt in movement left him momentarily paralyzed, just as he was about to initiate a phone call. Given that they were the only two people in the room, Elias realized that the commanding voice emanated from none other than her alpha wolf, Sable. This indicated that the voice was that of a superior alpha. In a manner similar to that of His Highness's wolf, when the wolf roared, all were compelled to pay heed. Consequently, he was compelled to bow obediently, displaying his neck in a state of submission, and he reflexively placed the phone down. This marked the first instance in which a candidate wolf had compelled him to submit. His rank was only inferior to that of the werewolves constituting the council. Nevertheless, he was readily compelled to carry out her directives. "It is imperative that you declare our rank as being third. It is imperative that the subject of Elara's possession of dual wolves be omitted from this discussion, and that further evaluation of my abilities be withheld. Do not test me, pup." The voice, both clear and imposing, persisted in its directive tone. The subject was referred to as a pup. In a different circumstance, he would have found it amusing, but the woman before him was not the type to be offended. The response to the inquiry was affirmative, in accordance with the expressed directive. It is imperative to determine whether the response was a spontaneous reaction of his body, independent of his conscious volition. As Sable retracted her suffocating aura, Elias was able to sit upright once more, just in time to observe Elara's black eyes transition to their customary chocolate hue. "I apologize. Typically, she does not exhibit a propensity for willfulness. It is important to note that the subject generally complies with the instructions provided to her. It should be noted that the intent behind the aforementioned statement was not to exercise authority over the individual in question. This particular voice has never been previously employed by her in interactions with others." Elara articulated an apology as she regained autonomy over her body. While she could not deny that she approved of Sable's actions, she still found it disconcerting to face the teacher. She had, in fact, commanded a renowned lycanthrope about whom she had heard many legends. This lycanthrope was in direct subordination to the king of lycanthropes, and Sable had even referred to him as a pup. "It is evident that she is your wolf. She will act on her own, if she feels your safety is threatened." Elias articulated a sense of helplessness, accompanied by a sigh, as he proceeded to elaborate on the situation. "Very well, I assure you that I will not divulge any information. It is not possible for me to articulate this sentiment, despite my desire to do so. The command of a higher-ranked wolf can only be retracted by that wolf or another high-ranked wolf. Consequently, unless His Highness expressly requests such information, such as the precise number of wolves or the specific rankings, I am bound by professional ethics to withhold it. Thank you. She expressed a sense of profound relief upon realizing that her clandestine secret would be kept hidden. Expressions of gratitude are considered superfluous in this context. He considered the matter to be of little consequence. In fact, he concluded that he had not acted independently. The query posed pertains to the specific methodology employed in the cultivation of dual canines, commonly referred to as wolves. Elias inquired with a sense of curiosity. The underlying mechanisms and causal factors remain to be elucidated. At the age of 13, I underwent my first shift, which was accompanied by a perception of profound physical change. This transformation was experienced twice, resulting in the emergence of two distinct aspects within my being. However, the underlying reasons for this occurrence remain elusive. Naira, the subject's grey wolf, is also unaware of the reason for this phenomenon. Sable, the subject's other wolf, typically maintains a state of suppression, as her aura could easily be detected, unless she remains concealed within the deepest recesses of the subject's mind. Consequently, she rarely engages with me, except under circumstances where she perceives a need for her assistance. I previously inquired of her whether she was aware of the reason for this, but she declined to respond. Consequently, I will not repeat my inquiry. The decision regarding whether or not to disclose this information to me rests exclusively with her. Elara articulated her perspective with candor. Very well. It is possible that further elucidation will be forthcoming in due course. It is evident that the two parties will have opportunities to interact more frequently in the future, both in academic settings and during moonlight duties. Should further information be obtained, we will engage in further dialogue. Elias' resignation was declared. It must be noted that the individual in question has not yet completed all the necessary exams to become a moonlight. She endeavored to articulate her concerns, but her attempt was thwarted by his interruption. A first-ranked werewolf, and concerns regarding academic performance prevail? The subject of this text is humorous. Elias's expression finally shifted to one of levity, recapturing his customary carefree demeanor that had been evident prior to her testing. Do not fret, for we shall meet again in the future. The subsequent candidate is hereby instructed to wait for a period of 10 minutes before entering. Despite my outward appearance, I am in need of a respite. He then made a gesture for Elara to take her leave. In response, she nodded and exited the room. Subsequent to the conclusion of the aforementioned events, Elias found himself in a state of physical and emotional weariness, having been subjected to a considerable amount of psychological distress and accumulated tension. This resulted in his descent into a state of physical and mental fatigue, manifesting in his slumping down on his chair. He experienced a profound desire to disclose his friend Elara's rank. It is conceivable that she could be Theron's mate. Despite his advanced age of 100 years, he had not yet located the object of his search. It is reasonable to assume that the king of all werewolves would be the only suitable partner for a female of her rank, given their equal status. If she was not his mate, then it would follow that no other werewolf could be. In light of these considerations, he conducted a renewed review of her dossier. She was 22 years of age and had never departed from the boundaries of her pack's territory. For a period exceeding 5 decades, the friend scoured the packs in search of his companion, a quest that ultimately proved unsuccessful. Following a period of 50 years characterized by unrelenting pursuit, he acquiesced, effectively shutting off the possibility of cohabitation with a werewolf who was not his legitimate partner. The subject of this study was already 100 years of age. Typically, werewolves exhibited a minimum life expectancy of 200 years. Theron, a high-ranking lycanthrope, possessed an even more protracted lifespan. However, it remains uncertain how long his life would be. This situation had prompted concern among the council, as the king had reached his current age without having produced an heir to the throne. One hypothesis that merits consideration is the possibility that the inability to locate his mate was the result of her not yet having been born. He relinquished the search prior to her birth, thereby ensuring that Elara Quinn was never examined. He exhaled once more. In any event, His Highness conducted regular inspections of the Academy. Moreover, given that he had previously conducted an inspection during the present year, it was possible that he would visit at the commencement of the courses in the autumn. 3 months had elapsed, nevertheless, he had already endured a protracted period of waiting. The question arose as to whether an additional 3 months would prove to be an acceptable wait. Given his aptitudes, it is conceivable that he could detect her scent, even if he were to approach the gates. It was not necessary for him to see her face to face in order to ascertain whether she was indeed his mate. Consequently, they would inevitably encounter each other at some point in the future. The following assertion is made with the understanding that it is not intended to be a comprehensive or exhaustive examination of the subject matter, but rather an initial exploration of its implications within the context of the present study. 3 weeks had elapsed since the seer test. Upon witnessing her proficiency, the other candidates developed a heightened level of respect for Elara. Of the 1,000 individuals who initially enrolled in the examination, approximately 300 remained after the initial test. These were the teams that had been ranked 3rd and 4th, respectively. The application of both the IQ test and the liberal discussion test led to a further diminution in the number of candidates, reducing the total to 100 individuals who were eligible for the melee combat. Elara was positioned between the remaining candidates, and she was actually placed first for the 2nd and 3rd test. The initial evaluation was conducted with strict confidentiality, ensuring that the subject's ranking remained undisclosed. However, it can be deduced that her ranking was, at a minimum, 4th. During this period, she maintained a low profile, as was her custom. From the perspective of the other candidates, it appeared that she experienced a significant enhancement in her appearance, surpassing her initial aesthetic appeal. Initially, she exhibited characteristics of an introverted personality and was not inclined to engage readily with others. However, as she developed greater self-assurance, she also experienced a heightened sense of ease in their presence. This led to them greeting her when passing by, to which she would respond each time. These facts appeared to augment her appeal. It was evident that her charm had only intensified since their initial encounter. During her tenure at the Academy, Elara had initiated communication with her family on a single occasion, however, her family had not reciprocated. Her brother, however, did send intermittent messages inquiring about her well-being and whether she was maintaining a proper diet. Notably, she had only had a single conversation with her mother. The subject called to inform her family that she had passed the first 3 tests. However, when the mother finally answered the phone after a protracted period of waiting, she informed her daughter to take care of herself and hastily added that she was unable to converse at that particular moment. Nevertheless, she did assure her daughter that she would call her back later. She awaited the call that never arrived, leading to her being unaware of her progress. Subsequently, she endeavored to contact her sister, yet Liora did not respond to any of her calls. She exhaled, recognizing that her sister was likely still displeased with her abrupt departure. Consequently, she ceased her attempts to call and instead left a message for her sister, instructing her to take care of herself. Despite her usual reticence to discuss her emotions, she conveyed to her younger sister that she loved her deeply. The final Monday arrived at last. Despite experiencing a modicum of trepidation, she maintained the conviction that she was as prepared as could be for the impending final examination. The subject had utilized the remaining weeks, with the exception of Mondays, when the tests were administered, for training purposes. Since childhood, she had been self-training, albeit in a clandestine manner and exclusively during her limited leisure time. Presently, however, she was in a position to engage in the practice openly and to allocate all of her time to it. Jackson's involvement in the training program, which was supplemented by his professional training, further contributed to her development. A crowd of 100 individuals convened within the imposing amphitheater, situated in the core of the academy. The subjects had developed a close relationship over the previous month, however, at present, a sense of wariness had emerged among them. On this particular day, of the remaining candidates, only 10 would be admitted to the Moonlight course, and the competition for these limited spots was fierce. It was evident that a fierce battle was imminent. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to congratulate you on successfully passing the previous tests. This elite group represents the upper echelon of achievement in the field. Regrettably, as you are already aware, we are only able to accommodate 10 individuals in the capacity of watchers this year. The final candidates will be determined through a melee war between all participants. The objective of this competition is straightforward: the final 10 individuals who successfully remain within the designated circle will be designated as the prospective Moonlight candidates, who will undergo a 2-year training regimen. Upon successful completion of the course and final examination, these 10 individuals will attain the status of full watchers. It is imperative to acknowledge that each group of valedictorians will function as a cohesive unit throughout the duration of the courses, a cohesion that will persist beyond the 2-year period. Consequently, upon completion of the program, participants will be designated as official packs. The investigation of cases and the undertaking of missions will be conducted in collaboration with other members of the group. The individual with the most victories in the melee war will serve as the group's alpha and will assume a leadership role. It must be noted that there are no established guidelines regarding the method by which one may compel other candidates to exit the designated circle. However, it is important to acknowledge the impartiality of the observers, who are renowned for their respect towards others and would only resort to lethal force as a last resort. Consequently, it is expected that all participants will adhere to principles of fair play. Best of luck and let us begin. The instructor, who appeared to be overseeing the final examination, issued a firm and audible warning to the candidates. At least 10 teachers were present, forming a circle around the conflict and seemingly acting as arbiters. The candidates were already privy to the content of the impending examination. Consequently, when the instructor indicated the commencement of the test, the majority of the candidates promptly initiated the selection of an opponent. "Remain in close proximity to me," Jackson communicated in a hushed manner to Elara at the onset of the altercation. It was evident that she possessed a commendable aptitude for combat, having rapidly assimilated the curriculum imparted over the course of several weeks. This proficiency was further compounded by her existing foundation of knowledge and skills. It is evident that the individual in question was aware of the subject's considerable potency. Nevertheless, he harbored a strong desire to safeguard her and ensure her successful completion of the endeavor. In response, she nodded her head in affirmation and maintained a proximity to him. The arrangement, in which combat was to be conducted in pairs, proved to be a favorable one. This approach was not unique, other werewolves appeared to be employing a similar strategy. They engaged in combat alongside the lycanthropes they had befriended during their time here. Initially, Jackson exhibited a certain degree of proficiency in the competition, given his ranking as one of the most highly qualified candidates. However, this did not imply an uncontested victory for him. On occasions when she perceived him to be outnumbered, she intervened to provide support and cover. Despite the initial success in repelling all opponents with ease, the conflict gradually escalated as the number of adversaries increased over time. It is possible that the assailants targeted him as the number of individuals in the circle decreased, aware that he was also attempting to protect her. However, this only served to exacerbate her feelings of upset and anger. It is evident that she was not a weakness, rather, she fought cautiously because it was her inaugural experience engaging in combat with others. In addition, she was also suppressing most of her aura and strength. Despite facing numerous opponents, the team maintained its winning streak. While Elara was vigilant, anticipating an imminent attack on Jackson by an unseen assailant, another individual managed to take her by surprise. The burly man was on the verge of forcibly removing her from the perimeter. Fortunately, Jackson witnessed the incident and reacted in a timely manner, effectively pushing her out of the way. However, this action exposed him to a heightened risk of attack, as it rendered him susceptible to being struck by a werewolf from behind, potentially resulting in a severe injury to the back of his head. Due to the subject's state of unconsciousness, the opponent promptly grasped him by the neck and endeavored to forcibly expel him from the designated perimeter. At this juncture, Elara's anger had reached its zenith. It appeared that the others did not perceive her as a threat in her own right, at least without his assistance. The werewolf's satisfaction was evident as he anticipated an opponent's absence within the designated circle. With a calculated move, he propelled Jackson's body with force, anticipating his descent beyond the confines of the circle. The subject's increasing rate of personally eliminating opponents was accompanied by a discernible expression of amusement. Concurrently, the probability of his ascension to the status of alpha increased. Jackson was the 10th opponent he had expelled. The lycanthrope pivoted, devoid of any intention to corroborate the fact that Jackson had indeed vacated the perimeter. He was convinced of Jackson's exit, and thus, he was already seeking the subsequent adversary when a resounding bam reverberated. The auditory phenomenon was not consistent with the typical sound of an individual landing, rather, it was more akin to the impact of a forceful collision between individuals. This auditory stimulus, in conjunction with the countenances of the other opponents who appeared taken aback behind him, prompted him to also glance in the direction of Jackson, who was still positioned within the designated perimeter. In a sudden and decisive maneuver, Elara employed a greater degree of her actual strength. She advanced with alarming celerity, strategically positioning herself to intercept his body before it crossed the border. The female subject expelled a sharp inhalation as she caught him, and she was on the verge of flying with Jackson out of the circle as well. She was not used to the strength she exuded, and the blow had also momentarily unbalanced her. However, in that particular moment, Sable assumed control, while Naira endeavored to mitigate her aura, seeking to prevent the leakage of her energy. The initial ranked wolf effectively stabilized her position, thereby preventing her from flying out. As she maintained her position, she positioned Jackson's body on the ground in proximity to the border, but not within the confines of the circle. She conducted a survey of her surroundings, systematically enumerating the remaining candidates. The total number of individuals in this group was determined to be 34. Sable's expression revealed a hint of smug satisfaction, her eyes glinting with a dark intensity. The number of opponents available for a full and adequate training session was inadequate. This marked her first excursion in a considerable duration, and yet she was confronted with merely a handful of werewolves. The other candidates sensed the abrupt shift in the atmosphere, accompanied by a notable release of pressure from a high-ranking wolf. All of the subjects remaining within the designated perimeter were identified as third-rank werewolves, with sub-rank values ranging from 1 to 8. However, they exhibited a remarkable ability to resist the allure of submission to the prevailing aura and maintain their concentration on the ongoing confrontations. Even the teachers observing from the periphery directed a slightly more intense gaze at Elara, as she was recognized as the sole female candidate. It is evident that she distinguished herself not only by her gender, but also by her status as one of the finalists. Sable appeared undisturbed by the gazes of confusion directed toward her by those in attendance, instead directing her attention to her opponents individually. She was able to discern their latent potential and the extent to which they might expand in the future. Concurrently, she was engaged in meticulous deliberations regarding her future pack selection. The werewolf that had thrown Jackson, overcoming his state of surprise, desired to run towards her and expel them both. The timing was optimal, as Jackson and Elara had only just entered the designated area. However, he was unable to take 2 or 3 steps before his arm was forcefully seized. The force of the pull was so powerful that it was comparable to striking a concrete wall. In an attempt to discern the individual who had grasped him, he perceived an afterimage. Subsequently, he found himself positioned on the exterior periphery of the circle, on the ground. Examining the scene with a sense of disbelief, he noted that Elara, a figure of notable lineage, had been positioned in a manner that suggested she had been subjected to significant physical force. Following her initial encounter with the pusillanimous werewolf that assailed Jackson from the rear, Sable circumvented the 8 most formidable specimens she had identified in the first instance. The remaining individuals were expelled from the circle in a rapid succession, either by grasping their hand, foot, or neck, or by any other viable method. 3 minutes later, the melee war came to a conclusion, with the individuals outside the circle failing to comprehend how they had arrived at their current location. Within the confines of the circular formation, a mere 10 individuals remained, 8 of whom were standing in a state of stunned bewilderment, while one individual remained unconscious. The remaining group was perplexed by the mysterious disappearance of their opponents, who had seemingly vanished from their immediate vicinity, only to be discovered lying on the ground outside the perimeter of the circle. From an external perspective, it would be reasonable to conclude that she vanquished the werewolves with minimal effort. However, it should be noted that catching so many third-ranked alphas unawares, even while engaged in combat, and subsequently overpowering them, represents a formidable challenge, even for experienced observers. It has been determined that the melee war has reached its conclusion. The teacher, taken aback by the response, found himself momentarily speechless, his initial reaction being to question the veracity of the situation. Even he would be inclined to believe that her opponents were easily defeated based on her fights, if he did not know their actual strength. Elara Quinn has been designated as the winner of the 200th Moonlight Acceptance Test and as the alpha of the newly established group. Concurrently, within the Silverhold pack the subject expressed uncertainty regarding the suitability of the dress. It is hypothesized that the aforementioned garment does not align with the aesthetic demands of the Luna ceremony. It may be advisable to procure one for personal use. Liora expressed discontent while inspecting the gown before her. Her sister had previously created a similar piece for herself, however, she deemed it to be lacking in elegance. Regardless of one's personal sentiments on the matter, it must be acknowledged that the garment in question is the sole white dress crafted by your sister, with the exception of the attire designed for the ball. It is imperative to note that the aforementioned attire is strictly prohibited for reuse. What will the public think of us if we wear the same dress? As previously stated, it is imperative that you wear one of the dresses your sister made for you or for herself. It is imperative to adhere to this dress code. It is imperative to understand the underlying reasons for this behavior. Do you wish to become the Luna, or not? Her mother's exasperation was palpable as she inhaled sharply. Liora had initially been the one who had provided assistance, and now she was the one who was tasked with explaining to her daughter the steps that she needed to take. You were the one who convinced me that Karen was the best choice, even though I had initially suggested waiting a little longer. It is imperative to understand the underlying reasons for this behavior. Her mother inquired with a tone of heightened intensity. Despite her mother's attempts at persuasion, Liora maintained a petulant posture. It is imperative to exercise patience until the designated marking process is completed, at which point the freedom to wear any attire of one's choosing will be granted. In the event that this is not the case, it is recommended that the subject don a new dress and allow the observers to ascertain whether the subject will still become the Luna. Subsequently, her mother issued a warning. If Liora remained unconvinced by these arguments, it is unclear what would be required to do so. The subject's acquiescence was expressed with the statement, "Very well, I will wear it." Finally, Liora responded, her tone laced with tension. Simultaneously, she began to meticulously adjust her attire to ensure the dress was properly fitted. The subject indicated a desire to replace her current attire with more vibrant garments. Until Sunday, the following internal monologue persisted. The event took place at the Academy on Saturday afternoon. Alpha, it would be advisable to procure sustenance. The other individuals have already convened at the designated table. Jackson's exclamation, which could be heard from outside the door, was characterized by a sense of merriment. She expeditiously opened the door and exited the premises upon perceiving his voice. "I apologize for the disruption, I was in the process of assembling my bag. The task at hand has been completed. Subsequent to the lunch period, I will no longer have the necessary time to complete the task." A formal expression of regret was offered by her, accompanied by a sigh. The subject had not yet adapted to the situation. The 9 individuals that constituted her pack had designated her as Alpha for the duration of the week, and she expressed a desire for them to cease doing so. However, the faculty instructed them to address her formally, a practice designed to acclimatize them to the established hierarchy. Consequently, there was no alternative course of action. With the exception of being designated as Alpha, a status that engendered a modicum of social discomfort, she experienced an increase in ease with the other males as well. Prior to this, she had spent the majority of her time in the company of Jackson. However, in an effort to strengthen the bonds within the pack, she has since devoted her time to fostering relationships with all its members. Is it necessary to remain at home for the entire 2-month period prior to the commencement of the courses? It is imperative to prioritize the maintenance of familial relationships, which can be achieved by conveying the outcome to one's family and promptly returning. We must prepare for the commencement of the courses. Jackson endeavored to reason with her. Her smile was slight, and she gave a casual shrug. She indicated that there was no need to prepare for the classes because they had not yet begun. It became apparent to her that he did not wish for her to return home. The subject's decision to remain on site was not influenced by a reluctance to return home, rather, it was a strategic choice stemming from the persistent encouragement by his mother to seek out a romantic partner. Consequently, he opted to extend his stay at the location for the duration of the summer season. It became evident that attempts to alter her perspective were futile, prompting a sigh from the individual as he proceeded alongside her in the hallway. It is evident that the presence of the aforementioned individual within the academy will result in a marked absence of intellectual stimulation for the ensuing 2 months. The following is a list of key elements that must be included in any discussion of this subject. On Sunday afternoon, her aircraft landed according to schedule. The flight had been a restful one, as she had been traveling first class on this occasion, a courtesy of the Academy. Her status as a moonlight was predicated on her aspirations, however, she was only recently becoming cognizant of the advantages and privileges associated with the position. Despite her status as a recent enrollee, she had already been the recipient of a scholarship endowment, the disbursement of which was scheduled to commence on a monthly basis. Her pack's membership was surpassed in size by that of the other members of the pack. However, due to her role as the leader, her pack's membership was almost double that of the other packs. This revelation left her perplexed, as she had previously examined the card during her visit to the city with Jackson and the other men to purchase souvenirs for her family. Upon examining the scholarship amount displayed on the ATM screen, she was taken aback by the staggering sum. This revelation prompted her to re-evaluate her financial resources, particularly those allocated for holiday expenditures. Even in the event of a single expenditure, the scholarship would still retain more than half of its original value, which would be reinvested each month. A notable benefit of the Moonlight student status was the privilege of traveling first class, a benefit that was further enhanced by the airline's ownership under the monarchy. Moreover, she was expected to be greeted with respect each time she visited her original pack. The Alpha and Luna were obliged to welcome her personally, though she expressed a preference to be excused from such a gesture. The pack functioned as an extended family unit, which precluded the possibility of making such demands. She was reluctant to inform them of her affiliation with Moonlight at that time. The tattoo that indicated her Alpha status, which was bestowed upon her ascension to the role of Alpha of her newly established pack, was located on her left palm. However, if she wore a glove, the tattoo was obscured from view. Her primary objective was to ensure that her family was informed of the matter and that they were the only ones privy to the occasion. Upon landing, she promptly donned her glove to conceal the mark. During the flight, the woman removed her glove while inside the airplane. When the flight attendant serving her a drink saw the Alpha's mark, she immediately changed her form of address. Furthermore, she exhibited a marked increase in her level of respect, and she did not raise her head from the ground each time she passed by her seat. This treatment was also received from the other flight attendants. The staff members even assisted her with the luggage until the departure terminal and arranged for a private vehicle to transport her to her accommodations, despite her assertions that these services were not required. The subjects had made a strong insistence that they perform the task. The subject expressed uncertainty regarding the potential response of her pack in the event of such discovery, but she expressed her reluctance to undertake the necessary verification. Upon arriving home, she expressed her gratitude to the driver who had assisted her with her luggage until the doorway. She then proceeded to knock on the door, waiting for someone to respond. After a period of several minutes had elapsed with no response, she concluded that no one was present. It was an anomalous occurrence. On Sundays, the prevailing expectation is that individuals will be in their place of residence. At this juncture, even her father would have been expected to have returned. Given the absence of alternative options, she conducted a search of her bag for her house keys. As an individual who values organization, the keys were located expeditiously. Thereafter, the door was promptly opened, revealing an empty residence. She expressed her displeasure with a furrowed brow, contemplating the whereabouts of the others as she transported her luggage to her lodgings. She also endeavored to contact them via telephone, but her calls remained unanswered. It is reasonable to assume that their arrival will be imminent. Therefore, it would be prudent to take a shower and wait for them. Upon opening the door to her bedroom, the atmosphere appeared to be out of the ordinary. Typically, her scent would be the most prominent olfactory stimulus in this room, with the scent of other people only faintly perceptible. Given the duration of her absence, which had spanned a month, it was reasonable to expect a diminution in the perception of other individuals' olfactory sensations, if not an absolute absence thereof. It is imperative to ascertain the rationale behind an individual's decision to enter her room in her absence. However, her highly developed olfactory senses were clearly able to detect her sister's scent in the room with greater intensity than her own. This notion brought her a profound sense of solace and comfort. It is conceivable that her sister's absence was so profoundly felt that she found solace in her own room. Liora had been angry at her for some time, however, it appeared that she was not being authentic to herself. Her behavior suggested that she was still behaving in a juvenile manner, as if she were a child throwing a fit. A slight smile graced her countenance as she deposited her bags on the floor and opened her closet to retrieve a change of attire. Directing her gaze toward the meticulously arranged items on the shelves, she paused when she observed that her own attire was in disarray. Notably, items belonging to her sister were also present among her own belongings. Upon directing her attention once more toward the interior of her room, she perceived that a significant number of her sister's personal belongings were in close proximity to her. It appeared that, rather than merely sporadically occupying her room, her sister had in fact taken up permanent residence in it. She exhibited a dismissive gesture, attempting to dispel her internal disquiet. Her fatigue was such that she sought repose. She would address the matter of Liora's presence in her room at a later time. This is particularly salient given that the latter's bedroom was of a superior size. Exhaling audibly, she effectively blocked out the atypical circumstances from her awareness. She then proceeded to remove her uniform attire and prepared to bathe. The formal attire, which comprised a black shirt, black tight pants, black army-style boots, a long ankle-length overcoat with a tunic collar, and a small brooch on the chest indicating her status as a Moonlight Course student, were meticulously folded by her and placed in her bag. She was reluctant to disrupt the uniform, as it evoked strong emotional sentiments. She proceeded to the bathroom, taking with her a towel that had barely been soiled by the general disarray within her wardrobe, with the intention of averting the formation of wrinkles on her attire. As with the bedroom, the bathroom was in a state of disarray and contained an abundance of Liora's skincare products. Following the completion of a brief shower to eliminate the accumulation of dust from her travels, she proceeded to dry herself before donning a maxi dress that bore a striking resemblance to the one she had worn to the ball. She then decided to inspect the contents of the refrigerator in search of sustenance, after which she retired for the evening to recuperate. However, as she was in the process of exiting her room, her phone abruptly sounded. "Greetings, sister. You called me?" Lucienne greeted Elara in a cheerful manner, then awaited her to disclose the purpose of her communication. "Oh. Indeed, I initiated a telephone call. The whereabouts of the aforementioned parties are unknown at this time. I am currently on an academic hiatus and had hoped to surprise you, but unfortunately, no one is home." Elara's response was formulated as she engaged in a methodical examination of her environs, seemingly seeking evidence of their existence. What is the intended meaning of the phrase "where is everybody"? It is imperative to acknowledge the significance of this phenomenon. Mother indicated that she had contacted you several days prior to inform you of Liora's Luna ceremony. However, you informed her that your attendance would not be feasible due to your academic commitments. Lucien's response was one of perplexity. To what do you refer by Luna ceremony? I was unaware that Liora had met her mate, and I was even less informed about the ceremony that was taking place. Elara, experiencing a state of perplexity, exhibited a slight furrow in her brow and ceased to direct her vision in an exploratory manner. Her concentration was focused exclusively on Lucien's response. You are unaware of this fact? Liora encountered her partner during the previous ball. Karen is the future alpha of our pack. Due to the temporal constraints imposed by the lunar cycle, the ceremony will be held this evening. Beginning on the morrow, the subject will henceforth be regarded as our official Luna. Lucienne informed her of this fact, although he did not understand why she was unaware of it. The query regarding the location of the ceremony was posed. Liora's response was not in accordance with her expectations, particularly if she had encountered her partner at the ball. This interaction occurred shortly before her departure. It is unclear why this information was not communicated to her. The motivation behind their decision to withhold information from her remains unclear. The rationale behind her lack of awareness and the motivations behind her removal from the collective remain subjects of inquiry. The act of verbal communication via telephone was a source of perplexity for her, consequently, she opted to engage in personal discourse with them. It is at the ballroom, as it was previously indicated. The organizers of the event expressed a desire for a substantial turnout. Would it be advisable for me to provide transportation? The ceremony is scheduled to take place later in the evening, leaving ample time for the completion of the task. Lucien's offer was made promptly, as he expressed a desire to see her in the near future. The subject declined the offer of assistance and elected to walk. She merely stated this, restraining any sentiments she might inadvertently divulge. At this juncture, the prevailing sentiment was one of perplexity and enigma. Initially, Liora's mother made an exception to her usual behavior by permitting her to take the exam for the Moonlight course. Subsequently, Liora encountered her future partner prior to her departure, yet she refrained from disclosing this information to her mother. It is noteworthy that the subject never alluded to the matter during the telephone conversation. This is significant because there is no record of any telephone calls being made to the subject, as Lucien stated. Liora's current residence is her room, and she is undergoing the Luna ceremony without prior notification. The inquiry posed by the subject indicated a query regarding the intended meaning of the term walk. This approach will inevitably entail a greater investment of time. I will be awaiting your arrival and will promptly retrieve you. Lucien inquired, his brow furrowed, as he meticulously searched his pocket for the keys to his automobile. Rely on my judgment. This mode of transportation will facilitate a more expeditious journey than traveling by car. In response, she exhibited a level of coldness that was previously unseen in her interactions with her family, despite her typically impassive demeanor. She did not await further verbalization from the other party, rather, she immediately terminated the call and cast the phone onto the bed. Typically, her poker face obscured her emotions, but at this moment, her displeasure was unmistakable. It has been demonstrated that her velocity is superior to that of a car. Following the donning of her uniform boots, which were designed to withstand her remarkable speed and force, she exited the residence with alacrity. The duration of the journey, which typically required a quarter of an hour by automobile, was reduced to between 7 and 8 minutes under her guidance. Upon arrival, she exhibited no signs of labored breathing. Join our Facebook and WhatsApp group for more updates, link is given in description. Rest audiobook will be continued in next episode.